Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Lindsay Lerner, and you're listening to The Cost of the Status Quo. More people than ever are questioning why they do what they do and forging their own path. And on this show, I sit down with these entrepreneurs, trailblazers, creatives, and overall awesome beings to discuss the ideas, the opportunities, and the overall tips and tricks they're using so that the rest of us can do the same. This is The Cost of the Status Quo. There we go. Thank you so much for joining me for the first Cost of the Status Quo live. We are here now with Brian Dwiggins. Come on out. Yes, there we go. Brian is the founder of Borealis Coffee, which is the amazing space that we are all in together now. Brian was born and raised in Alaska, has traveled around the world and back, all to land here in Rhode Island. Brian is an incredible craftsman and has built everything from the space you're sitting in to assisting me in building my van, which some of you have seen in the past. And when he's not physically building, he can be found roasting coffee or coming up with other business ideas. This guy here is here to share his stories from many different industries and how he got to be here with us today. We'll learn from Brian's tips, tricks, and habits and leave space at the end for audience questions. Thank you again for everyone who is physically here, and thank you to those listening to the final episode. Please continue to rate and review. It truly does help. And thank you, Brian, for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Heck yeah. Let's do the thing.
Okay.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Amazing. Where'd you grow up?
I was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska.
The hell was that like?
It was amazing. It's like nowhere else in the country, really. And
Sure.
I didn't really realize how unique your childhood is when you're growing up in Alaska until you go out to, go to school out of state and start realizing like, oh, wait, you didn't go out like on like these remote fishing trips where you were 14 and were handed a shotgun and were like, all right, we'll be back in a couple days. Like, make sure if a bear comes that you use a shotgun.
Oh, that's normal.
And it's like,
for you.
Yeah, that's like pretty unique to Alaska, I think. And I had
Anyone
once,
else
I had
have those
one snow day,
experiences?
my entire time growing up, and we had 30 inches of snow in a 24-hour period. So now living in New England, where it's like, oh, it might snow on Monday, so it's Thursday afternoon. We're gonna go ahead and cancel school Monday. It's like a little bit of a transition,
a little bit.
But this is home. We've been here for like 20 years now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And from Alaska, where was the jump from there?
So I went to school in Colorado.
Okay.
I went to Colorado State, go Rams, in Fort Collins. Growing up in Alaska, I wanted to be going to school out of state, but also wanted to have, be near the mountains and the outdoors and all the things that I loved about growing up in Alaska. And I met my now wife in Fort Collins, and she's from Rhode Island. So here
Some
we
of
are.
you might have met her already. She's Jessie Dwiggins,
Yeah.
our movement connoisseur.
She's the movement and brand ambassador and all things visual aesthetic of
Sure
Borealis.
Ugh.
And the general sort of, it was funny because she was talking about like, oh, this is the SCR thing that turns the head. It was like,
Oh, yeah.
no, like you're the thing that turns the head of the thing. But
Jessie's in charge.
yes,
Brian might get some
I'm
credit.
the figurehead, and she's the brains of the operation.
And when you were going to school out in Colorado, what did you start studying? What did you think you were going to do?
I was an open option major for, which means that I was undeclared for the first year. And then I went into natural resource management. And when I had to take like chemistry and calculus and all these like really technical statistical things that we were literally talking about earlier today, I was like, oh yeah, this is not my scene. So I then changed to technical journalism because I thought it'd be cool to do like travel documentaries. I like to travel and just explore and do new things. And then finally ended on a communications degree with a critical media studies emphasis. So I covered a lot of ground.
And were there any expectations from your folks or from your family, or did they just not even bother talking to you after you left Alaska?
No, I've maintained a great relationship and still have a great relationship with my family and everybody back in Alaska. But it was mainly for them. It was like they're just like, well, as long as you get a good education, like you can kind of do whatever you want. Like there wasn't that expectation to be like you're going to be a doctor. Okay,
that's solid.
Because I think the writing was on the wall pretty early that they knew that I was going to be kind of walking my own path, I guess.
Okay. And so there we go. And so what was the final degree? What was that?
Communications with critical media studies.
Okay, so you graduate, you're in Colorado, and then what?
Then I met a girl. And yeah, so then I was kind of pushing to move back to Alaska. And then when we finished school, I graduated a semester before Jessie, even though she started 2 years after me, which should say something about, again, brains of the operation. As you finish school, it's kind of like, well, what do we do with our lives now? When we were ready for a change, even though we both loved Colorado, but it was just kind of like, let's shake it up. Let's do something new. And just because of the proximity of Jessie's family and having sort of that foundation of support, as so many people that when they get out of college, they're like, we don't know what the hell we're going to do. And we need to be near some family that we can live in their basement for a few months until we find jobs and get our stuff together.
Pay for things.
So we moved here with my grand idea of like, I'm going to live in Boston. I'm going to sell my car. I'm going to like, and 6 months after the job that brought us out here, I quit because it was working in office and corporate. And
what was that job?
I was a tour consultant was the job title, but it was basically like a sales job where I was calling, like cold calling teachers and saying like, hi, I work for this company. Like, do you want to take your kids abroad? Like, you teach Spanish, like take them to Mexico or take them to Spain or whatever. And they'd be like, no, yeah, I work in like a really poor school district. And like, I'm like, oh, I'll send you a fundraising packet. Like, no, you don't understand. Like, we're like on food stamps. Like, yeah, no, I'll send you, like, we don't have anybody to fundraise with. So it was just like really hard to try to, and I realized that I wasn't really great at like hard selling people on things that they didn't really need. Cause I mean, as much as travel is great for those of us that do it, like to try to like force feed it to folks is a little tricky. So yeah, so 6 months in, I was like, this sucks. A friend of mine, that guy that introduced Jessie and I was doing abroad. He was working for a company that had opportunity to work in Singapore. So he jumped on that. So I was like, I'm going to come visit you in Singapore. Oh, okay. So went to Singapore and we went to Singapore and Bali and Thailand and kind of bounced around. And
amazing.
It was when I told my company that I was doing this, like, no, you've already used your vacation time. I'm like, no, but you don't have to pay me. Like, it's unpaid. They're like, you don't understand how vacation time works. I was like, what? And that was when I was like, yeah, corporate is definitely not for me. I was like, all right, well.
Were you like suit and tie in this?
I had to wear a tie.
Wow. Was this before or after the tattoos?
I could have a beard, but I couldn't grow a beard.
Oh.
So like if I had a beard when I started, I could maintain a beard as long as it was well kempt. But as this is sort of like my, I basically will shave with clippers just enough to like, I've always used like facial hair as like a more of an accessory where it's just kind of like, this is how long it's been since I've shaved because I don't think about it.
Excellent.
But like, hey, let's do something interesting. So I have like gigantic, ridiculous sideburns right now. And
if you're happy,
then like 2 weeks from now, they will go away, but keeping it fresh.
That. And was this before or after tattoos?
I got my first tattoo
on the trip to Bali.
No, that was my second tattoo. Okay. First tattoo was in San Diego, visiting the same friend though, but it was just like a stupid like memorial tattoo for a friend of mine that had died, and then went to Singapore and was like, because I was with the same friend, he was like, oh, we should get tattoos. We're like, yeah, like it's too early to go to the bar, and we're still kind of. And we've already done a lot of the tourism things. So like, this is good to go get a tattoo for a few hours and then we'll go out.
I know a few people like that. And for those listening and even the people who are here, you can't see all of Brian's like really sick artwork, but I can't imagine that was navigated well in a corporate space either. So.
Well, I did do the restraint full sleeve. So it stops like a little bit above the wrist so that you can wear long sleeves and not be shown. I don't have like the neck tattoo or anything. Yet. I don't know. After the last tattoo, as you get older, they hurt a lot more.
Noted.
Like the first ones like didn't hurt at all. I was like, yeah, this is cool. But
dances, romances, that is what I'm needing now.
You ditched this corporate gig.
Yep.
And then what?
So when I was in school, I worked for campus television, just like kind of volunteering because it was fun, like, go do some run and gun and like shoot some random little interviews of, it was campus TV. So it was a bunch of fluff stories and stuff, but I really enjoyed it. I loved like sort of the storytelling process and like going and shooting images and like creating a story out of it and like showing it to be editing and seeing the kind of story that you can create by these images and stuff. So I was like, well, maybe I could do something along those lines. Like, wouldn't it be cool to do some like a travel documentary? Because I just got back from Bali and I was like, all I want to do, if I would have shot this whole thing, it would have been so cool. So I found a school in Waltham that has since been declared bankruptcy and had a bunch of like other bunch of other things, which whatever. It was basically a 9-month certificate program to like do digital video production and editing and stuff.
Totally.
But really what it did was create, like I was able to meet some folks that were able to like kind of open other doors and got a job at a rental house renting film equipment and lights and grip equipment and things like that. And then from there I met a couple of guys that worked in the Boston and Massachusetts film industry. And they wrote a referral for me to enter the film industry doing lighting and grip.
Amazing.
So that is how I sort of pay the bills for about 10 years.
Sure.
But it was all freelance and, hustling.
That's a grind.
And yeah, it was fun work. And, I worked on a lot of, some big shows and some smaller budget shows and a bunch of stuff, shot some commercials.
Any cool projects you want to brag about?
I mean, I worked on like Night and Day, which was pretty cool.
Okay.
I was on the rigging crew and I did second unit. So like a lot of the stunts that they shot on that, we like closed like the HOV lane going to the airport in Boston. And so like, I'm like driving,
so you're like the problem.
I'm driving like a gator, like down
Brian.
like the HOV lane. That was pretty cool.
That's pretty badass.
I worked on a bunch of Sandler movies. Not a whole lot of like, people are like, oh, that movie was shot in Boston. That was really great. I'm like, yeah, I didn't do that. I was working on like I was working on the Kevin James movie that everybody saw and thought was terrible. But,
hey, well, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah. And
so
then
you're on these sets, and because I've known you I did the math. It's been almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me. And so rumor has it, Brian's just like at home. He's got the big baby Brian, semi-baby Brian, has this like little tiny coffee roaster on his kitchen counter. And then you're just like, when did you decide like, other people should have my coffee?
Yeah. So that was a big leap of faith. I was, because it was all freelance work, I would be, you'd work these like 70, 75 hour weeks, on top of the commute. And then I'd get home and the movie would end and I'd be like unemployed for like 4 months. Oof. And I'd be like, well, what am I going to do between now and the next show? So you go to coffee shops, as you are all too familiar. And so many people that are starting their businesses, they go to a coffee shop because you get free Wi-Fi and you have to get out of your apartment or whatever and just go crank a little bit. And so I was home roasting at home and would just bring my coffee to set when I was working. And I'd brought my whole setup. I have a milk crate that had like my water kettle and I had a French press and a couple different pour over options and my little hand grinder. So I'd be sitting there hand grinding. So I would be like, making coffee for people on set, and my friends that do craft service, AKA Team Crafty, they were like, hey, if you ever get to a point where you can roast enough to provide for us, like we'll totally buy it from you. And I was like, all right, well, I roast like 4 ounces at a time and you go through 50 pounds a week. So we got it. There's a little bit of a scaling issue right now, but I'll keep that in mind. And I fast forward a year or two, I was in a lift, like an aerial boom lift, babysitting a light on the movie The Judge,
like an Uber
in Dedham, Massachusetts. And I was like on my phone, like just cruising, like looking at coffee stuff as you do, like, you read about what you're interested in.
Sure.
There was a coffee roasting class in Vermont the week after the movie was wrapping. So I was like, all right, well, worst case scenario, I'm going to go to Vermont for 5 days and hang out in Vermont and drink lots of coffee and hang out with coffee nerds. Best case scenario, actually learn something and take it away. So I went up there and found that I actually kind of knew what I was doing, and I kind of had a little bit more of a knack for it than some of these folks that were in the class with me that had, their own coffee shops or were like working for other roasters that were just trying to build their skill set or whatever. So that kind of gave me the confidence of like, okay, like you can probably do this if you really want to. And then that began like the sort of like the journey to be like, all right, should I do this? Should I not? You know, like as you start listing and write your business plan and try to hone all of the, you know, doing the due diligence.
Yeah.
And I was working on a show in April of 2014, like March, April of 2014 with Jason Sudeikis, low budget. And this orange roaster was available. Like I found it on like an auction site.
Sure.
And so I keep, I was like working with all my buddies and I'm like, hey, what do you think? You know, what do you think? And my friend Jesse's just like, either buy the damn thing or stop talking about it. But you've been talking about it for like 3 years. So if you're going to do it, like I fully support you. I will buy coffee from you, but otherwise just stop talking about it. Like, and by the way, can you move that light over there?
And how many pounds of coffee can that baby hold?
This one, this is a 5 kilo. We were doing about 6 pounds per batch was our yield.
So more than 4 ounces. So progress.
More than 4 ounces. So this was a step in the right direction. And I sold my Apple stock and, you know, sent a certified check to this guy in Washington State that was selling it.
Okay.
Some articles of incorporation, all the things. Sure. And in July of 2014, I roasted my first batch. Yeah. That was with one customer, and that was the Team Crafty guys.
And where was this guy living? The roaster?
That was at a terrible, terrible mill in Pawtucket. That was like cold and drafty. That mill.
That's the one.
That was the one.
Sure was.
It's still there. It's still.
It's barely standing, but that mill is still there.
And it's cranking out lots of great small businesses too. It's like I fled that place at the first opportunity. Like we came in one day and they were repairing the roof, but they didn't tell me, and they had like ripped like all the skylights out, and it was raining inside my unit. And they're like, oh yeah, we put tarps over everything. I'm like, it's a food production kitchen, man. Like
your roaster. That's not cool.
So yeah, I knew I had to get out of there.
And so what was that moment like for you when you were like, I'm going to spend what seems like all of your money on this roaster?
Yep.
And you decide to go and you start this LLC and you officially become a business. Was there any hesitancy? Was there any nerves? Or was it just, I'm doing this?
Yes, there was. It had been one of those things that I've been thinking about, and because this mill place was like really pretty inexpensive.
Sure.
The big clincher for me on that was that when I went to look at the space, the previous tenant had painted all the walls orange, and the roaster that I was like buying was the same orange. And so like I called Jess, I'm like, hey, can you come here? Like, can you meet me here?
Right.
Like I'm about to sign a lease, and she's like, okay, I'll be right there. And then she comes in, she's like, oh damn, like this is like, we have to do it.
Sure.
And it was only a 1-year lease and the rent was pretty cheap. I was like, well, worst case scenario, we do it for a year, we try it. If it works, great. If not, we just pack it up and I sell the roaster and whatever. And
there's a lot of serendipity in terms of being in Vermont, taking this coffee class, and then you buy this orange roaster, you've got an orange space.
Yep.
Which that space was terrifying. Now, and like it's triggering a lot of memories for me. I'm glad you got out of there.
Me too.
And so what has since 2014, you're now, obviously listeners, audio only cannot see how beautiful this space is, but this is one of 2 spaces now. The business has been around 7 years. That's insane. Congrats.
Thank you.
Take me for a ride now. I've got a feeling it'd be good.
Riverside has been open for about 6 years now, and we've some people that had children right when we opened, like we've seen their kids grow up, and like we were like vested in their lives and they're vested in ours, and we have this this really great community that has been created, not just because they like, oh cool, like we appreciate what you've done for our community, and so that's probably the most rewarding, just overarching.
What was that first space like?
Which one?
You had the, mill that's decrepit and falling apart.
Oh yeah, there's not a lot of positive from that place. Except that it provided the stepping stone to get to to Riverside, which basically was my loan to do the build out in our East Providence or Riverside location was the same that I was paying for rent in Pawtucket. Wow. So it was like, all right, well, that's a no brainer. Like totally. It's, it's a lateral move financially.
Right.
even though it's a much larger risk, because that was when I had to step away from the film industry to really commit to coffee full time. And that was the hardest part, because it went from not only like me giving up my income, but also like saying goodbye to all the people. And I've since gone back and I pick up days on movies every once in a while, which is fun just to kind of dip my toe back in.
Right. When you were making that decision, was there a checklist that you had, or was there a game plan, or was there some sort of just delusional sense of self-confidence that allowed you to do that? I'm asking for a friend.
I think, we had, I had sort of like I had tested the market to some extent, because I did have the film community that had was sort of behind me. And the building, like the location, is fantastic. Yeah. It's like, it was really destined to be a coffee shop. Totally. Like if it wasn't gonna be a train station, then it was destined to be something like what it is now. Sure. And we had the bike path. And so I did have quite a bit of confidence that it was going to be fairly successful, right. But that doesn't mean, that it wasn't like terrifying thinking about like, oh wow, I'm getting money and I'm like borrowing. But I had a lot of like support from Jesse and from family that were like, yeah, like, just do it. And totally. Worst case scenario, like, we just rent the property out and sure. You just cash in and you go back to working on movies. And
is that something
so I had that like back pocket, right? Which like having and I think that's something that I had the benefit from doing the movies that I was, working in that industry. Yeah, freelance. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to quit like my job that has a pension and a 401k and all right. that. And like burn a bunch of bridges because sure. people that typically work in that world don't understand like the insanity that that people that want to run their own businesses actually right. commit to.
Totally. Yeah, you committed.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked out.
Me too. We now have 29 employees between the 3 locations, between the roastery sure. and the 2 cafes. And, now we have all these people that like rely on us. And it's like, oh yeah, these people are like paying their rent and their mortgages and, for sure. and everything. And, we want to be able to provide for them and all of that. And it's like, so now like the stakes are a lot higher because it's not like, oh, well, if it goes south, like screw it. Like I'll just like pack it in and we'll sell the roaster and I'll go back to working on movies. And sure. that's definitely one of the things that like weighs the heaviest. I'm hoping that I'm like providing skills for people right. and like to work towards, even though most of them are not going to work here for the rest of their lives. And I'm well aware of that, but, creating skills that they wouldn't have like, hey, great. You have your first management experience, like right. with us. And like, hopefully I can do you proud so that if you go off and get another job, totally. I have some people that used to work for me that met working for us and are now married. So that's cool.
Shout out to Love.
Yeah.
We'll keep that too.
Yeah.
So it's a win overall.
Overall win.
Amazing.
Got a feeling it'd be good. Yeah, I've been thinking we should.
Before we wrap up, there are 2 questions that we ask every guest on the show. What is the worst piece of advice they've ever gotten? And then we'll end it on the high note. So what's the best piece of advice they've ever gotten?
I was at a coffee conference pre-starting Borealis. It was like the year before when I started really turning the wheels and everything. And it was a discussion panel about, so you want to start a coffee business or so you want to have a coffee shop or something like that. So you think
you can dance?
Yeah.
Cool.
And one of the panelists said, it was the owner of Square One Coffee in New York. I can't think of her name now, but she was just like, don't open a coffee shop because you want to because you like being a barista. Like start a coffee shop because you want to own a business and because you want to run a business. So if you're not interested in the entrepreneurial side of it, right, like don't start a coffee shop. At the end of the day, like the people that are making the drinks and right. the people that are grinding the coffee and all that stuff, those are the ones that you're paying. Right. Like you're the one that's in the back, like writing checks to, when their walk-in goes down sure. or like plunging the toilet or like running to Ace Hardware to grab a plunger because somebody blew out the toilet and there's, you got a clog or whatever. That falls on you.
Totally.
And like, you have the most risk, but you also have the most reward. I think.
Sure.
So, so that's probably the best piece.
And the worst.
Oh, you're like starting a business is going to be easy, and you're going to be able to work for yourself, and you can make your own hours.
Yeah.
It's like, I make my own hours.
I know a few entrepreneurs sitting in this room that are more on that 24/7 track, not that 9 to 5.
Right.
We're like, no, we don't. 9 to 5. Screw that. I want to work all the time.
Yeah. I mean,
But no one tells me what to do.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I get to make my own hours. Like I took like 3 days off around Thanksgiving when my mom was here from Alaska, and then I've been working basically like 12 hours every day since then.
Sure
And
do.
Whatever. Like that's what we signed up for. So there's
Totally.
some understanding, but it's like, you must love it. You get to like make your own hours. Like, yeah. How many days are in the week? Yeah, that's my schedule. Cool.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
I'll be
Super
happy
appreciate it.
if you help me for a while.
Now we'll take a couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, critiques.
So that machine back there, you said how like you quoted in kilograms how much you can make. So can you put that in perspective? Like how many cups of coffee?
Sure. The question was for Brian's original OG orange roaster, how many pounds of coffee could be roasted in that?
Yeah, so that's we got 6 pounds of coffee per batch. And we use like a gallon of coffee is about a half a pound of brewed coffee. So that would be about 12 gallons of coffee.
That's good math right there.
So,
Coffee's not even that much.
Sure.
I can break it down by grams, but I have that on a spreadsheet that you'll have to reference, which
Right.
we don't have time for.
That's a lot of math.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned on a recent trip to Costa Rica, shout out to my 2 friends that are here from that trip, that, and you can correct me on my coffee language and if my Spanish translation was accurate or not, but I was told that for every little teeny tiny basket of coffee, that the coffee cherries that people are going out and picking, they're making maybe $3 per basket. And then from that basket, you might get a couple ounces of like the final coffee that you can grind and drink, which is wild.
Different countries have different size baskets
Sure.
and picking rates and
There's
stuff.
a lot of
But yeah,
options.
generally like with what I have heard is
Point
that
of the story is that it's really damn hard.
It's very labor intensive, and the average rate of coffee, like people that do the picking of the coffee in Central America, is like between like $8 and $12 a day, like a day. So like they might be able to, if they can fill the basket like 4 times, they make more money.
Sure.
Because they get paid by the basket.
Totally.
But
So really
it's
savor
pretty-
your coffee, folks.
yeah, and then like but hand picking, and a lot of times like that's a whole other, like I'm not gonna get into it. But,
That's fair. That's fair. Anyone else? Questions? Coffee questions? Coffee questions?
Do you do anything with your coffee grounds?
we have people that drop off 5-gallon buckets, and we just kind of put a grinds in the buckets, and then they take them home. So we don't compost them, but we have people that we compost with. And like in Riverside, there's a guy that has like a little composting thing in his backyard, and so he picks up 5 to 7 5-gallon buckets a week of compost, and then here we go through like probably like 4 a week, and we have like 2 or 3 people that will just drop off. The Barrington Farm School, they drop off buckets.
Very cool.
So they're like, "What do you do with it?" I'm like, "Please give me a bucket, otherwise it goes in the dumpster."
Are you interested?
Yeah. So if you have a bucket,
you want
put your name
compost?
on it, and like I'm always happy to put it in a bucket for somebody.
Okay, there we go. All right, I'll take it.
Yeah. And then the chaff from the roastery goes to our backyard.
Beautiful backyard. Now I know why.
Yeah.
I get it. Anyone else before we? I will repeat the question that you ask.
So you've got 2 shops, 2 locations. Do you distribute your coffee to any other shops?
The question was, Borealis has their own 2 cafes. Did they distribute their beans to any other cafes to resell?
Yes, we do. We have a handful of retail accounts that sell the bags of beans, and then we have some other cafes that we work with as well that we sell to.
Sure do. Want to name a few for our local folks?
Yeah, PB Donuts and Oak Bake Shop. And then we work with Plant City. We work with Rebel Bagels. Stock Culinary Goods has retail bags. Johnson Farm Stand has retail bags. We have recently started selling some coffee to RISD for like their catering area. And yeah,
so you name it, you're drinking Borealis. That's what I like to hear.
And then we also do some toll roasting as well for people that want like custom blends. But
so you've been in business for 7 years, and it sounds like you've been meeting some awesome communities. What's your vision? Like, is it to kind of just settle into 2 shops, or?
The question was, after being in business for 7 years, what is the vision of Borealis Coffee? What's next?
If you would have asked me a year and a half ago, it was that, to have probably 3 cafes. As of right now, I'm pretty content with 2 and just kind of work on refining the process and stuff. We have in Bristol here, we have a full kitchen. So we're now making all of our own baked goods for both locations. So there's a lot of work just to kind of get us sort of like locked in. And I've got a great pastry team and, good team generally, but just like really work on strengthening all that side. But the sort of like the brand mission is that we believe coffee is an experience worth sharing, and that, coffee builds community. And it's not, our product isn't as much about the cup of coffee that you're drinking as much as like providing a space that people can come together, share ideas and be together. And that's kind of what got me loving coffee from the beginning. Like, it was like getting together and meeting your friend and be like, hey, I heard you got a business idea. Like, let's chat about it. And you like workshopping and all that stuff. So
on that note, thank you. And thank you all for being here. Heck yeah. Appreciate it.
Along for one ride now. I've got a feeling it'd be good. Yeah, I've been thinking we should. And I'd be happy if you held me for a while. Or I'd be happy if you held me for a while. I'd be happy if you held me for a while. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Cost of the Status Quo and learning the wisdom, stories, and ideas that will have you feeling inspired and ready to take on the world. If you've enjoyed this, please remember to share, rate, and review. It means the world to me and the team putting it all together. If you're looking for more information, you can find us at costofthestatusquo.com or on Instagram at costofthestatusquo. If you've got any questions or curiosity about me, you can find me at lindseylerner.com. That's LINDSEYLERNER.com or on Instagram at lindseylerner. Thanks again for listening. Hope you have an awesome day.